It is so beautiful. If you just go look outside the window, don't get too far from the TV. If you can see the window from there, that would be better. Why would you want to leave San Diego? We have so many wonderful things to offer here, and we talk about staycations. We've got a deal for you this morning that you're never going to want to leave.
As of July 2016, there are a reported 4,900 plus homeless in San Diego County, 1,100 in the downtown area alone. There are entire blocks of town lined with tents and tarps. Just walk down the street in East Village and you can see for yourself.
Oh, y'all taking pictures, huh?
Yeah, I was walking.
You right there together?
Nah.
Meet Orlando Barahona, a graphic and web designer who has been homeless on and off in San Diego for the last 2 years. A sufferer of depression and alcohol abuse, Orlando has gone through the various stages of the San Diego public housing and mental health systems and has experienced firsthand what it's like to submit to the system for help. His journey has led him to formulate his own ideas for transitional housing and recovery programs, which he has developed into a detailed plan for a colony of tiny homes to house families, children, and other homeless people. His plan, which he has pitched to developers, is gaining the attention of city officials and is being recognized as a possible within-reach way to help alleviate the homeless population in San Diego. This is his story.
I'm Orlando Barahona. I'm 44 years old. I was born in Honduras. When I came here, I was about 16. I landed first on Miami Beach. Then I went to New York City, lived there for a while, came back to Florida, went out to New York City again. We're talking about 20 years in between. I was a web designer and graphic artist. I had a few clients as a freelancer, but mostly two of my largest accounts were clothing companies. I updated the websites, I worked on campaigns. They were very interesting times for me, and I learned a lot. However, eventually the economy took care of a few of the clients, sadly. A few went under, and two of the largest accounts I had, those two, they closed. There was nothing else for me to do. I didn't put my eggs in other baskets. I became homeless when I arrived in 2014. I arrived in Vista. I was invited by my sister, my middle sister. She and I have not really lived together for a long time, but when she invited me, I came. I had just finished a very bad relationship in Iowa, and she invited me to just reinvent myself and get back on my feet. However, we had some very important discussions about well-being. After this one big argument, she asked me to leave. I was asked to leave my middle sister's apartment. I self-medicated. A mixture of regret, anger, sadness, just a lot of it just came together. So I had nothing to take at that point, and I decided to just walk into a supermarket and get a bottle of vodka. I decided to just self-medicate until I would pass out somewhere. But that somewhere turned out to be bushes. The first few places I went to were behind abandoned buildings. Normally that's the first one. Sometimes bushes, a few empty parks here and there, why not? Sure. But I had to be mindful of police being around. I didn't want to also be arrested for that. So, well, I had a little bit of savings, but not that much. So I was just out in the cold for however long that lasted, almost 10 days. I regretted not having that much money, but I spent $5 at a time. I went from Vista, where my sister was, to downtown San Diego, to pretty much all around the town. I just hopped on a bus and hopped on a train and let myself be taken places. Well, since I got to experience firsthand being out on the streets, I just continued to panic, continued to think I had no choice. And I guess in a movie you would call self-preservation, I thought of committing suicide. At that point I was looking at cars, looking at buses, looking at buildings, trying to figure out just which would be my less painful option, if you want to put it that way. And I didn't want to subject my family to a lot of torture, so that was my only anchor. That's when I decided I was going to walk into hospital and really help myself. I voluntarily admitted myself into the psych ward. Once my psychiatrist there determined that I was suffering from a major depressive disorder, he suggested a couple of solutions. Asked me to review a list of places where I could go for outpatient treatment, or, if I preferred, I could be in a crisis house for about 2 weeks. That's the longest you can stay there. And after that, well, go on to something much longer, like, say for example, a substance abuse program. Since I came in intoxicated and having a panic attack, I think I qualified for that label. I had abused a substance, and I was also depressed. I had crashed. I came here and I crashed, basically.
Orlando was moved from the psych ward to a crisis house, a residential recovery program that caters to those undergoing a mental emergency. The program allows patients to stay for 14 days, but connects them with other emergency residential programs that are more permanent. Orlando's caseworker presented him with a large list of options.
Having that list, calling places to find out if there was any availability, eventually led me to my discharge planner at the crisis house telling me of a bed open in a shelter in Carlsbad. The shelter I went to is in an industrial area, which is unusual, but that's where they got the permit to build this enormous, beautiful looking building. It's almost like having a huge resort on a hill. I was determined eligible to stay. They had the bed at that point, so I said yes. Why not? I was not told that much, except that I would need to just look for a job every day and figure out what to do at the end of 3 or 4 months. My belongings, I had to carry almost all of them, because every night someone lost something. Some of the guys would do meth in the bathrooms, and a couple of times someone invited me to drink, and I thought, well, damn. Respect has a very big place there in the minds of everybody who's homeless. Everybody more or less has an honor system. And sometimes you just make friends spontaneously, something you help them with. All of a sudden you're a friend, it's not unfamiliar. You become almost a part of the community, and it feels a bit more like home once you get to know more people. But it's transient, everybody goes somewhere else after it. During the first 2 months, I was getting just desperate. I was thinking, I'm gonna be homeless again. So what exactly am I gonna do now? The panic just really started to set in. And I came across this sales rep for a pharmacy in Northern California. She has the numbers for a lot of case workers. She knows pretty much all the health and human services agencies that have medical and substance abuse programs. So she referred me to one. And their foundation is really simple. It's mostly Christian based. Bob is, to them, he's just the most wonderful person who ever lived, and I understand why. He went outside of himself to put together this program, and people follow it to this day. There are so many people who still do. I'm not saying that they would be prejudiced against science. I just think they didn't have the money to bring in a professional for that. So they stuck to the easiest, which was the free program. In other words, they didn't have to pay for any proprietary therapies. They didn't have to develop any proprietary therapies. It was supposed to be a program for addicts who were helping other addicts. But eventually that didn't work out. I was told I should have one of my own. In other words, that I should figure out what my own higher power is supposed to be. Most of the time, people would just point out to God as people know Him. I've been more of a secular humanist myself, but I still believe there's a spiritual connection between all of us. I had to understand that yes, people make the church, people make the congregation. Obviously, it's about the people who moderate, it's about the people who participate. But I found nothing. I found nothing that I could hang on to that was logical, that to me said, so from here on, what? Am I supposed to just, pray my anxiety away? That's not going to work for me. I need to talk to a professional. I didn't think I would have to go into this, but I think it's just fair. After a while, I had to own up to my issues in the past. The downfall essentially started when I became HIV positive. That's when everything just went upside down. Someone that would be qualified to understand all those feelings, all that fear, the anxiety, sometimes it would be medical. Why wouldn't they incorporate this into the program? What's the problem? So I guess it turns out to be more about a revolving door of patience than it is about helping someone. These differences eventually just rubbed me raw. I was not convinced this was the right treatment for me. I gave it a shot, because I did, but I was very convinced it was not for me. So I moved on. Back again at the same point where I didn't know anyone. There was no one to call except who really had another couple of days to just think about what I was going to do with my life. Where would I go? I didn't have the heart to just say, this is it. This is it for me. Why should I keep trying? It seems like life doesn't want me here, so just negative thoughts. They took me places I shouldn't have. And in fact, when I felt this last time, when I had suicidal ideations, I felt I was entering this room I wasn't supposed to go into. That was so enlightening to me. It felt as if I had done something I wasn't supposed to at all. I went into some place where I was planning on taking something that just wasn't mine. This spark, this brilliant spark of self, this life within me. I had the feeling that I needed to do something with my life before I left.
In a final attempt to regain control of his life, Orlando again admitted himself into a crisis house to seek professional help. It was there that he met a dual PhD psychologist who referred him to a program that uses more evidence-based techniques for controlling anxiety, like cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness techniques.
I entered this house, and that's how I began a much happier, much more stable, much more productive program for me. I had a hell of a ride, but now I'm here, and I'm having it much better.
With his newfound stability, Orlando has been working to become a patient-to-physician mediator to those with substance abuse issues like himself. He has also had time to develop an idea that he has had long in the making, a colony of tiny homes to house homeless people that need immediate access to beds.
You could say my transition from zero to activist had to do with experiencing myself, the system of sleeping in cots and just feeling like nothing, like I didn't exist. So I promised myself I would just eradicate that injustice. I really would find a solution to this. I started looking around for what other countries were doing, and I came across a project by students in Canada. So that got me thinking of a solution here, and then as it turns out, other cities have been implementing it in Oregon, in states that I didn't even think would actually do it, but yes, they're having success with it. People are finally waking up to the fact that someone who is destitute needs a place to be, to not take out that anger, the anguish also on people, just anyone they're close to, of wreaking havoc in people's lives just because they're feeling that they haven't been treated right. And if it's especially someone with a mental challenge, that's especially important. A lot of funding for mental health care has not been forthcoming, not over the past few years. Supposedly there are funds available for treatment, but how good is treatment without a place to be?
This first come, first serve philosophy is what sets Orlando's idea apart from other programs like it. You cannot just walk into a shelter, substance abuse program, or any emergency housing service without first doing an official assessment to determine your housing needs. HUD, or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, uses the VISP-DAT assessment tool to determine the needs of all homeless people in San Diego. Their scale is based on need of services, with 0 being no immediate need to 10 plus being those with the most issues. Under this assessment, only those with scores of 10 plus, those with severe mental and physical issues, are applicable for permanent housing or housing first programs, where most people only qualify for rapid rehousing, which is essentially rent assistance with some health services for a limited period of time. Once the examination is complete, it can take days, weeks, and even months to get into the assigned programs. Families who may be in danger of ending up on the street may not receive their rapid rehousing money until it is too late. That's the main objective of Las Casitas, to provide shelter in the time between becoming homeless and getting into a program. This will alleviate the number of people living on the streets waiting to be admitted into the various short-term housing and crisis programs. The other objective of Las Casitas is to serve as a centralized location for homeless resources. The on-site resources will include medical professionals, psychologists, therapists, and caseworkers that can determine every homeless person's needs. This will ultimately alleviate the numbers of homeless entering emergency rooms for mental illness, allowing emergency rooms to better prioritize their time and costing them and taxpayers less money. The third objective of Las Casitas is to provide transitional and low-income housing. Because of the low housing inventory in San Diego, there are many families who simply need a place to stay while they save up money to move into their next place. Las Casitas will offer low-rent homes just for this purpose.
When I set out to research the project, I found incredible support for it. I found support in public officials who would meet me and finally discuss with me how possible this could be. I met with people in the Oceanside Housing Commission who told me of a particular property close to the DMV out here. I think that's ideal. You have law enforcement close by, there's a hospital across the way. How much better could that be? It's ideal.
The city officials also told Orlando about a way he could get public funding for the project. he could enter it into a government-funded emergency housing proposal competition. If the idea for Las Casitas won, it could receive up to $500,000 in federal funds. This funding would be available due to the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act of 1987, which is a U.S. federal law that provides federal money for homeless support programs. Enacted by Ronald Reagan in 1987, this was the first legislation ever written that attempted to deal with homelessness, which they then saw as an impending crisis. The money from this act is distributed to states by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, $1.9 billion in total for emergency housing solutions and homeless outreach and prevention programs. California gets around $22 million, and San Diego in particular gets around $900,000 to $1.2 million, depending on the source you look at. Some of the money goes to rapid rehousing programs, but most of it goes towards new permanent housing programs through grants that are awarded through local proposal competitions. Nonprofit developers and organizations create proposals for new housing projects or outreach programs, which they submit for review to the local COC. If an idea is approved, a minimum of $70,000 and a maximum of $500,000 will be granted to the project. When Orlando heard about the local permanent housing proposal competition, he knew this was his chance to make Las Casitas a reality. He again got to work pitching his idea to local nonprofit developers and found one who liked it. Orlando informed the developer of the property he had found and of the information he had gathered already on the project. The developer assured Orlando that they would do the necessary research for the application and submit a formal proposal into the competition.
So this research is being done by a possible partner, a developer who is putting the research together. If this is successful, man, it's going to be an awesome holiday.
This was back in early summer of 2016. The developer promised Orlando they would have the research done and the application submitted by the September 14th due date.
When I contacted this local builder, they had already set up quite a few buildings, permanent units for low-income housing, and I knew that I could approach them to research my project with them, to bid with them if it's all possible. That would save me quite a bit of time and money for licenses and so on. But this first person I contacted, who represented the company, I would say badly, was very unprofessional, let time lapse. There was no research done on the property I found in Oceanside. In other words, I was brushed off. It feels like it was stalled, rather distastefully. I was not exactly happy with how it happened. I approached my contact on the day of the deadline, and he feigned ignorance of the entire project. I had no idea what kind of message that was, what kind of attitude that was. I do not understand it. I don't understand why it was deflected that way when it could have been the beginning of a great project and the funds were available. I learned amazing things during this process. I found the property. I also found what I must do, which is to partner with someone, a private contractor, someone who would understand the project and be there for me. That's where I can sit down to develop these tiny homes with someone, preferably someone artistic. I would say in a college, it would be tremendous. It could even be a competition, which I think could be a welcome thing for private industry. So that's my process. I really need to partner with a contractor first so that this can go forward. And that's where I need your help.